Hi, I'm Jose Kahar, and this is going to be a review of Genevieve Gornichec's The Witch's Heart. Now, maybe you just finished playing the new God of War Ragnarok game, or you have watched a ton of the Thor movies for Marvel, or you really love Norse mythology in general, and you're ready to enter into the Norse fantasy landscape for novels. I cannot recommend this book enough. I loved this book. That's my review. Now go read it. If that's what you came for is permission to go read this book, please go check it out. It was so good. So, what am I going to go into? Well, now that you know, and if you wanted to read it, you decided to go read it, and now you're going to come back and hang out with me, and we're going to go in the comments and discuss this amazing book. I'm just going to quickly go over like a bare review, just my experience reading it. So what's the hook, what I appreciate about the dialogue, who the audience is, and other relations. That's what's going to happen. So what's the hook? Well, the hook, kind of like I've mentioned, this is completely from the story of Angerboda. Now, she only appears maybe once, technically twice in the Prose Eddas. She is mentioned by like a poet who's commonly used as a source for the time in Norse mythology. There's almost nothing on her. The bare minimum. Like, she's the mother of wolves and monsters is like pretty much what we have. The mother of Loki's children. Full stop. That's it. So this book is a fantasy book about all of the Norse events, all of them, from Angerboda's perspective. And it is excellent at doing that. Where I kind of go with novels is, if it's about characters who engage and have relationships with each other, I pay extra attention to the dialogue. Now, what do I mean? If you've ever read It by Stephen King, not going to spoil much, but he hits the ground running and he just introduces all the kids like all at once. And then you go through and you're like, oh, which kid is that? Who's that? Because the dialogue kind of blends together. They're all children. To him, they kind of all talk similar. And so it can get confusing. That is not a problem here. Each character is so distinct. And it's not just down to the characters' distinct dialogue. They're culturally different. So if you're talking about the Jotnar, the giants, they have like a culturally different kind of dialogue than the Aesir or the gods. And then once you go down into individual level, each one of like the subgroups, they have a distinct way of talking that reflects their background. And then the best dialogue in the whole novel is Angerboda, which is great because we're going to have to hang out with her the most, right? Her dialogue evolves throughout the novel. And it is wonderful. I'll stop there. So I really appreciated that. That is the one. I don't nitpick too hard about like themes or main points or what about the creative direction. Like, dialogue is where I hang out with the most, so the writing needs to be sharp there. And speaking of that, speaking of character dialogue and distinctness, it's also sharp. And what I mean by sharp is it's succinct, but it's extended a bit. It is extended, exaggerated a bit, but it is far more than acceptable, because this novel isn't written in Old Norse. It's not written in an ancient language. It's not written in Old English. It's written in modern English. But it gives a little style to each of the characters that makes it feel both older and modern. And that is really appreciated because it sets the tone. It gives you a feeling for where you're at. So that's the dialogue. I really appreciated it. Next, audience. Who is this for? That is a bold question. This was a big swing, because I wouldn't call this novel immediately accessible. You can, without knowing anything about Norse mythology, no pop cultural knowledge. I gotta tell you, if you come in here for just knowing Marvel, it's gonna be confusing. God of War Ragnarok does a better job actually like telling you what the relationships are, so you can jump into this and be like very easy. But like the Marvel stuff is like they kind of messed it up, but it's still fun. You can still go in here with that, but you're gonna be like, wait, who's who? However, if you got nothing, you can still go in here and you can still read a great story with distinct characters and dialogue and writing. However, I highly recommend you have a foundational knowledge of Norse mythology. If you want a recommendation, look no further than Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. It is a great introduction into the Norse world and a modern kind of telling. So check that out if you want something, because when you read this book, she goes into so much detail. There's no stone left unturned. It's the entire world. There are, you could call them Easter eggs, but it's the level of detail where I've read Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman. I've played the God of War games, watched the Marvel movies. I've read a ton of Norse fantasy novels. I've read the prose Eddas. I've gone to find little stories here and there from sources close to the time, or like an oral translation from long. I really enjoy Norse mythology. The detail, they mention some of the most obscure stories in here, and it's lovely. I'll say it's great. It really makes it special because you can go in with the base pop culture knowledge and you'll enjoy the novel. You can go in with the foundational introductory knowledge, you'll enjoy the book. But if you go in as an academic or a fan like me who just likes to read a lot of stuff about Norse mythology, there's stuff for there too. It's a different experience at every level of reading. It's wonderful. So please, I would read at least some introductory information on Norse mythology before going in, because it'll really make the experience worth it. Next, I kind of wanted to go into Milton and Paradise Lost, and you're like, why are you going to talk about that? If you can bear with me, quick little backstory. When I was an undergrad, I was reading tons of English novels and other novels, and one name kept popping up, Milton. He seemed really influential. So they didn't have enough electives for me to take, and I needed just one more to graduate, and so I got to take an independent course. And I kind of twisted the head of the English department's arm and be like, I want to learn about Milton. He's like, just the class on Milton? Just Milton, the body of work, let's go. Then I got to pick the professor, and she was like, why do you want to learn Milton? And I'm like, his name pops up everywhere. I feel like this is going to be useful. And honestly, it's been really worth it. And I love Milton, especially Paradise Lost. So, there are a couple things you need to know about what I'm going to talk about. One, John Milton's Paradise Lost. But don't forget, there's also John Milton's Paradise Lost. And where are the similarities? I feel like there's some influence here, whether it's subconscious or culturally. What I love is when you go to read Paradise Lost, before he even starts the story, he prays to God and he says, please give me the knowledge to guide me to write this story, because Paradise Lost is about Adam and Eve in paradise in Genesis, and Lucifer, and the whole story of Genesis. And if you've ever read Judeo-Christian mythology, if you've ever popped whatever you had, King James the 16th or whatever, and you read Genesis, specifically Paradise, it's really small. There's like almost nothing in there. And that's kind of where the similarity comes in. Because, like I said, there was almost nothing on Angarboda in the prose Eddas. And so, in a way, Genevieve Gornichec fills out this story that doesn't exist in such a way that it feels like it's been there the whole time. I really see this being influential in the Norse world and the way we talk about like Norse mythology and novels and stuff. Next, you have the characters of Lucifer and Loki. Now, in pop culture, it's very clear that Loki has been highly influenced by Milton's depiction of Lucifer. Loki is by no means evil. He's, as anyone who knows Norse mythology, he's just mischievous. He's in the gray. He solves as much problems as he causes. So Lucifer is in a way in Milton, and this is what was the genius behind it, is that Lucifer is highly relatable, and he's not exactly just evil, that there's a path that gets him there, that gets him to evil, but he's so relatable. And it's an enjoyment to read, because you're reading this and you're like, oh my God, Lucifer is so good, so entertaining. You did what? Oh, come on, please choose the right thing. And then you get to God and he's like super boring on purpose. And you're like, oh, come on, let's get back to Lucifer. It's not that way here, because Angrboda is a really, really amazing character. But Loki is alive and three-dimensional in this way where you really understand why Angrboda would fall in love with Loki. So I really, really feel that this could have a textbook version, that someone could go in and explain all the references and details and what this means and add all these annotations and notes. It would be worth it. There's, like I said, there's all these different levels to read this. You can read as a complete amateur, as someone with foundation, as an expert, as an academic. It's wonderful. But that's pretty much where the Milton Paradise Lost stuff stops, because this is poetry, that's prose, it's just standard writing, and it has a little bit of inaccessibility unless you really, really like poetry. That's pretty much where the comparisons stop. Now, what I really loved about this novel is that this modernized Norse mythology, Neil Gaiman's translation. However, retelling. I couldn't let it go. This really modernizes the story. In modern culture, in pop culture, the way we see the Jotnar, the giants, they are a marginalized group. And if you go and read these stories, it really feels like it, because the gods, the Aesir, they victimized the Jotnar. When you get to the war during Ragnarok, it's like, yeah, I understand why these people are fighting you. And what's amazing is her perspective is allied with the Jotnar. And so you're getting this story again. Right now in the modern world, we're really examining and looking at behaviors, and it's no longer, he who wins the war tells the story, right? It's now like, well, what is the story? What is the truth? What are these perspectives? And this takes that modern lens of looking at a story, of looking at a history, of looking at a people and groups and conflicts, and it runs with it. And again, that's what makes this such a good story. I'm not going to get too deep into the nitty gritty. I won't, but it is really, you'll understand once you read this. Norse mythology is something that is so mystical. What I love about Norse mythology, more than I love Greek mythology or Egyptian mythology or all these other, Judeo-Christian, all these other mythologies. I just mentioned all the Western ones, didn't I? Anyway, I love all of them, but what I love about Norse mythology is two things. One, it tells you a lot about the people. All of them tell you a lot about the people. But Norse mythology, their gods die. Like, die. What does that say about the people? That even their afterlife is insecure. Even their gods aren't immortal. Then the next thing I like about Norse mythology is that it always feels modern to me. I don't know when Ragnarok happened. Did it happen a long time ago, or is it going to happen? When are these stories taking place? It always feels like something that's happening. And it's no different with The Witch's Heart. So I highly recommend it. I love the novel. If you want to talk about it, or if you have other references or influences you feel on in this novel, please go in the comments below. I really would love to talk about it. Also, maybe recommend the next thing for me to read or watch or listen to. I really enjoyed reviewing this, and I hope I can keep doing it. All right. Thank you.